Thanks, Mindy. Thank you for getting this started in Boise. If one of the people I first met, who's now my new friend, Vanessa, raise your hand, Vanessa. Yes, just moved here from LA, and she told us, she's like, oh, I don't know about moving to Boise, Idaho. You know, she'd always lived in cities, but she found Creative Mornings in Boise. I was like, okay, at least I got one thing to ground myself and meet new people. So it's wonderful. Thanks for the space. Dylan, thank you for being so authentic. That's very inspiring. So I'll launch into this, and I'll tell you about myself throughout it, because there are quite a few slides, because I love visuals. So, flow. To first define flow, this gentleman, who is a lovely man and has written a huge body of research, books, he's on a ton of YouTube videos and TED Talks, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. Hard to say that one, but he's really responsible for the definition of flow, which is an optimal state of consciousness in which we perform our best and feel our best. And we become so involved in that particular state that a sense of self or ego tends to fade away, and we're so activated in it that moment to moment just flows, and the sequence of the next decision or the next movement just seems to like seamlessly follow without a lot of analysis or critical thought that has to take place. And we have a sense that our whole being is involved. I really, if you're interested in learning more about flow, I'd recommend starting with him. I think he just has such a humble and generous character, and he always starts in talking about the reason why he got into it. He was a little boy at the time that World War II was ending, and he saw all of the adults around him having to piece their lives back together without some of their family members, with communities and homes destroyed and businesses lost. And he noticed that some of these people did it successfully and seemed to end up being happy people, and others didn't. And it wasn't necessarily dependent on whether or not they could rebuild the business or get those material things back. Some of those people did that and they were happy. Some of those people did that and they were unhappy. And he saw that some people never regained those things or lived a completely different life and they were unhappy, and some of them were happy. So as a young student, he decided to embark upon a career in psychology and identifying, in search of what it was that made certain people happy, he identified this state of flow. So he is really the godfather of flow, and he's still alive today. So that's really a significant thing to have this kind of hold in modern day psychology. And the way that he did that, we're looking at a slide of all kinds of people in flow state and their specialties. So he went all around the world, and it's the largest study ever done on flow. And initially he picked out experts in their field, whether that was surgery or ballet or martial arts or extreme sports. And he interviewed people and he asked them what it was like to be doing what they loved best and what they'd really mastered and had become an expert. And they all identified this state that we just talked about, the definition. A sense of loss of self, each moment flows into the next. And it often ended up resulting in a state of bliss. Dylan talked about that as well. So he put together this huge body of evidence and was able to have one particular finding that was the one that he hoped for and suspected, and it was that these people who, within their respective areas of expertise, reported that they experienced what he calls flow state, also reported being happy. And happier than those that did mastery in their thing and didn't experience what is defined as flow state. So then, with a lot of people behind him and curious, he was able to get funding to go around the world again and talk to ordinary people. He talked to little Korean women that worked in fish market. He talked to Navajo sheep herders. He talked to Detroit machine workers. And when he identified that people talked about this state of being where things flowed effortlessly, they feel like they're performing their best and they feel their best, there's a sense of self that's gone, he also found out that those people reported being happy. So interesting. There are the origins of our understanding of flow state. So 3 things that we really need, like, to really grab onto and understand about flow. 1, that flow state creates powerful intrinsic motivation. It's like liquid motivation due to releasing the most addictive neurochemicals that we know of. So those are norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, and another painkiller one, oxytocin. And we don't know of other states in life where they're all so present, and the impact that that has on the mind and the way that then kind of the sub-organs of our brain direct energy and attention. Second is that it cuts the time to mastery. If you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's book, 10,000 Hours, says that anyone can be, it kind of dispels the myth of talent, and that said that if anyone wants to become great at something, you just need to put in 10,000 hours. Well, if you can do that in flow state, you can cut that time in half. And there are a lot of people now interested in these findings. There are major research institutions and businesses that are doing research to understand how do we hack or help people get into flow state more easily. One of them is Red Bull. Red Bull is really interested in this chemical concoction that can help people they're doing legitimate research. And the Flow Genome Project is a group of people that are helping performance athletes try and have that opportunity to step up on the podium, and also working with really innovative corporations that are focused on creativity, that needing people who are creative is what we need in the 21st century to solve the problems that we face. So there is a lot of scientific research going on around it. But the third thing that Michele really identified is that people who have flow in their lives are the happiest people. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my flow experience in life, an unexpected experience. Ooh, if those could go down at all, are they going down? But, and it started with having a baby. So I had a fantastic life, like 2 loving parents, grew up in a small town, tons of support, good in school, good with friends, life goes along as you would, I came to expect it would all go along just fine. But my fantastic husband and I wound up pregnant and expecting our first child, and we go to the first ultrasound where gender is to be identified. And as they're moving that ultrasound wand around, the woman stops, kind of has a funny look on her face, goes into the next room, has another person come in, they look, because someone else comes in. This suddenly isn't such a joyous experience anymore. And the end result is what they identified is that this fetus had what was called a polycystic kidney that took up a large part of his abdomen, and it looked like a big ball of grapes, non-functioning kidney, and the other one couldn't be identified. So the conversation then was that this fetus is unlikely to survive. We don't know exactly what's happening with the kidney. He could have a kidney, but it just remains to be seen. So we decided to take a gamble, and this child was born. And his name is Bennett Porter. Immediately upon his birth, because of that pregnancy, we were really gripped to see what the child would need when he was born. And immediately we found out that he had a congenital birth defect syndrome called VODR. And VODR is a syndrome that very early in utero, the generic organ buds that should get a recipe to become certain organs, it goes a bit haywire, and those organs don't get the right recipe to become what they should become. So he had multiple organ systems along the midline that were not properly formed or not existing at all. And so those early days while he was in the NICU, doctors began to lay out a plan of how this could potentially be corrected. And the majority of it were massive surgical corrections, where they would use this organ to take that, and they would get blood flow from here, and they would regenerate this, and then if that healed properly, then they would be able to do the next thing, and they'd need his uterus to declare itself, and this and that, and And you could do this alternative surgery, but this one we have better, and it was just, you can imagine, it was just completely overwhelming. And then the surgeries needed to begin, like day 1 of life. And it continually was like, okay, it was just so hard to imagine what the future would look like for this child and have any faith that this was really the right thing to do. This ended up resulting in 16 surgeries before he was 2 years old. And if I have to give up all worldly possessions, one thing I want to have is this photo. Because when I look at this photo, I see the epitome of human resilience. Every time that kid went to surgery and he was down and tubes and wires and all kinds of things coming out of him, we had an amazing support system. Both Grant and I's parents were almost always with us. We ended up going to Cincinnati Children's Hospital. He would bounce back like this, like, okay, are we ready to get on with it? I'm ready to play, I'm feeling better. And we would have time to like let these wounds heal, let drainage tubes come out, let things declare themselves and medication and things like that. And he'd get up and running, and then it would be time for the next surgery. So it was this sequence over and over again for the first several years of his life. And while we had amazing support and phenomenal family and great health care, I had an internal phenomena that took place, and I feel like I learned to cope with this situation by calling upon this mama bear that I think every woman knows what I'm talking about. And I don't know if you've seen this scene in The Revenant where she's just like, yeah, I saw that scene and I was like, you do your job, Bear. That's how it's done. But that approach was, I think that Leonardo DiCaprio in my world was really the fear of the unknown and the fear that it might not turn out and the fear of not having control over how it would turn out. So I felt like I had to take control over those things. I had to get every medication dispensing absolutely perfect, and everything that we had to do with his feeding. His esophagus wasn't fully formed, so he wasn't able to eat until just before 6th grade. So he received all of his nutrition through a G tube, and everything that had to be done. And meanwhile, I'm working for our healthcare insurance, so all these things felt like they 100% had to be under my control. And as it turns out, that was kind of I had the perception that it was working because fortunately he was succeeding and he was thriving and we were moving through life. But I think if there's an opposite state of flow, it's probably control. I'd love to go to one of Mikhail's discussions sometime and find out if that's true. So I wonder, when I look at it, this person apparently, I don't know why you would do that or succeed in doing that, is in flow state. But to me, that kind of looks like a watery hell. And it looks like what I perceived would happen to me, that if I didn't continue to maintain control, that my child or my life would come crashing down on me like that wave. So I don't think, I was not experiencing, if he's experiencing a blissed out experience, I was not experiencing the same thing. So what flow science can tell us about the difference between what was happening in his brain and my brain is this. So what we're seeing, I can't turn it on the left, is the brain of how we operate most of the time. We have a lot of prefrontal activity, and that helps us make decisions. It helps us integrate our past experiences, future possibilities, all the things that are going on around us. That's one of them, that kind of like the intellectual part of our brain. What's happening in flow state is that all of those neurotransmitters that I talked about earlier are flooding the brain and refining focus, which was a major departure from what we suspected about the brain. We've all heard the myth that like some people can use 100% of their brain, like our brain is this big and we're only using this small portion of it, that we're only using 10% of it. But actually when we're performing at our highest, it becomes so hyper-focused and really efficient, taking in the most amount of pertinent information, which tends to not be stories from the past or fears and things that may be happening in the future. So at about 4 years old, the surgeries that our son has to go through are, knock on wood for the most part, he's 14 now, they're over. They've been able to manipulate the majority of his organs and put them into place, and he no longer has surgery, and now he has a task of just being a kid. And there's less parenting involved, and there's less ultra control that's needed and involved. And everything kind of calms down. We're not going to Cincinnati anymore. We're not making as many trips to the hospital. And as that calms down and my role as that bear kind of diminishes, that's not what's in his best interest anymore, I find that I'm depressed and anxious and angry a lot of the time and really feeling unhappy and unpleasant to live with. So I go to counseling and different things, and I'm trying to figure out how is it that I can, and guilt and shame, that's the other thing. We successfully got my son into this place of being okay, and we had all this support from friends, and why should I be sad and depressed and have this anxiety? So guilt and shame added onto it were fantastic. So I'm thinking, what can I do to change this state of being? I have so much to be grateful for. And I decided to look at my past and the things that made me happy in the past. And what I knew about myself as a child is that I really loved being creative. I loved dance. That was my sport. I didn't play high school or junior high sports. I danced. I loved to make things with my hands, draw and paint and sew, and finagle my cousins and my sister into these scenarios. So I had been taking a class with my son called like a Mommy and Me like beats class, and it happened to be on African drums. And the teacher, rest in peace, Rick Thompson, was a West African expert and musician with African drums. But he was teaching this kids class. And I really liked it. And when the class was over and my son didn't like it so much, and I didn't have an excuse anymore to show up with my child, I did talk to Rick about it a little bit more, and I could take adult classes, but he told me there's a dance class. And if you really want to understand this art form, it's not just about the music, it's very much about the dance. They go hand in hand. They're not inextricably or separate from each other. So I found out about this dance class at Fort Boise, and I went to the first one, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be good. I have years of training in classical ballet dance, and like walking into the room, it's like really different. People are kind of happy and chill, and there's drummers, there's live musicians, like 6 of them, and anyway, so things fire up, and it's really interesting, it's different, and the drums sound great, but the music's really different, and then people start moving, and I just like completely got spanked, schooled, like everything that I knew about it was completely different, but it was so engaging. It was so, like, if I were to think about myself and what I thought I knew or what I was doing or not doing right or get self-conscious about it, I was screwing it up more. So it totally drove me into that present state of mindfulness. And there's a really certain aspect about African dance where the rhythm and the signals from the drummers are really directing you. And if you're not paying attention, then you're not doing the next step. So there's a communication between the drummers and the dancers. And it just blinked out, so now I'm going to rely on this. So this adventure took me like to the other side of the world. And I was taking this dance class maybe for about 2 years. The teacher is now one of my best friends with the other best friends that showed up for this. And at about the 2-year mark or something, she said that she sat us all down one day in the class and said that she had things going on in her life. She's trying to raise 3 teenage kids, and that she was not going to be able to teach the class anymore. That's not okay. So I'd been taking the classes and I'd been going to workshops in other parts of the country, and I'm like, who's going to do this? This can't happen. This is going to have to change. We had a visiting teacher from Seattle that was a professional drummer and dancer in Guinea, and he would take trips of people to West Africa. So I decided I would attempt to teach this. It's obviously not my culture. It's not my ethnic group. So I felt in order to be able to do this as justly as possible, I should go there and study it. So I went there and studied it, and this happens to be a state of flow state. I'm actually getting it right. This is after 6 weeks. So this picture is me in, I don't know how well it shows it. I'm not having fun, actually. It happens to look like I'm in coordination with this fantastic woman who is teaching me at the moment. But it was miserable. And we'd been doing different rhythms for a series of weeks, and we'd worked up to this particular rhythm set called Dun Dun Ba. And West African music is done, Western music is almost always 4/4 timing. There's an upbeat and a downbeat. And West African music is so much more complicated, a lot more like jazz. It's polyrhythmic. There's a number of upbeats between the downbeats, and a lot of the movement that you're doing has to be right in those particular spots. So we'd gone to this complicated rhythm, and I was just screwing up left and right. It was terrible. And I was tired, and I'd been eating nothing but rice for lots of days, and not having enough water, and like sleeping on this weird mat that had bugs on it. And I had profound respect for my teachers. Like, these people live in those conditions every day, and they are absolutely the equivalent of Olympic athletes in their dedication to the art and representing their culture. And I'm just screwing this up, and I can't get it. And I start having these thoughts that are just overtaking my mind of like, you're so stupid. They're gonna see how unintelligent you are and that you can't get this. And who do you think you are anyway? White, middle-class, suburban mom all by yourself in Africa. And it's just, they're just perpetuating themselves, and they're taking over my ability to pay attention and my ability to get on to the next thing, and I'm choking back tears. So I just finally, before I cried in front of these people that I had profound respect for, and they do this every day, I just like, I need to take a break. I grab my backpack and I go off into the jungle for a moment, and I try to breathe and deal with this panic attack that I'm about to have, and I don't know what to do, so I throw on my headphones, and fortunately it was Carly Rae Jepsen, Call Me Maybe, like 4/4 rhythm, like sticky sweet Americana, like everything is okay, and I can just like groove to that. I go. So I avert the panic attack. There's nowhere to go. I can't run away. So I go back out, and little by little, I stay focused on what's happening and shutting out those voices, and I slowly start to learn this more complicated form. And then I get back to Boise, and we get to keep having classes, and my friends who are here, we get to have this weekly class, and there's not just an individual flow state, there's a group flow state that exists, and they do studies on that as well. So we get to have classes, and there's singing, and there's dancing, and there's live music, and then it moves on to like costume making and sewing, and we have it has even higher meaning because we're helping other people. We sponsored a school in Guinea. We helped bring this artist and his son to Boise and have him get a job and be able to sustain himself. So all of this was ticking along really nicely, and thanks to my husband putting up with all these shenanigans, it was working out really well. But slowly over time, things happen. Life has seasons, and drummers started to move, and things started to change, and it just wasn't quite as possible to hold the class. And at this point, the class had kind of morphed. There were no longer people who knew this particular type of music in town. So, but we were kind of trying to keep the thing going because I believed in it so much. People would come to me after class and report kind of this flow state bliss and how much they liked it and loved it. And so I tried to keep it going. And I realized from that experience where I went off in the bushes and listened to Call Me Maybe, at that point I realized that the major difference was whether or not I was listening to my thinking as opposed to just being in the now and shutting that out. So actually named this class the Susu word for now, which is yakos. So we did that for a while, and that too had its season and kind of came to pass. And again, as I was talking, a lot of students, a lot of people reported the interesting thing about this art form, putting them into this particular state, which researchers also call the deep now, which I think is cool. So I actually have a job too, and my job was looking for volunteers to learn more about meditation. I work for a pharmaceutical company, so I like threw my hand up in the air so fast. And fortunately, I got to do that. So I went to a week-long course in New York that was done through the Center for Mindfulness in the medical school within Massachusetts University. And this is a huge body of research on meditation, led by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he started with Buddhist meditation and really felt as though what was missing in the Western medical model was our understanding of what leads us to illness or our relationship to illness. And just throwing pills and surgeries and putting control of what's wrong with us in someone else's hands and they're going to fix us was maybe in part needed, but there was a major aspect of that missing. So I got to do this particular training, and to boil it all down to meditation, mindfulness, and what they understand now about the brain science is this, is that when we are going about our lives, we're typically using a different balance of, and I just lost the term, why did I lose that? Somebody give the abbreviation, because then I know it all. Thank you. The default mode network. So, but there are times that it can become a bit out of balance where, so the hippocampus is in charge of our past experiences and the stories related to our past experiences, our beliefs, the sense that we've made of the world based on what we've experienced and the stories we've created out of those. The amygdala is where we have our fear response. It's a protective mechanism. And when the two get together, there can be a lot of stories about fear and a lot of hypothesizing about what might happen, what if it happens, and a lot of like our interpretation of what happened in the past, but that may or may not always be correct. So what they have learned about meditation is that focusing on the present moment strengthens our awareness to realize when we're really activated, when the hippocampus and the amygdala are really feeding our minds and our decisions information that influences the way that we behave. I like to put a name to things, and I like to note it. It helps me notice when these things show up. So Woody Allen, I think hopefully everyone's familiar with Woody Allen, but he's kind of that nagging pessimist, Debbie Downer, what if, maybe you shouldn't, what if they're saying this, what if they're thinking that, those kinds of things. And then Valdemar is just straight up cold, hard fear. And so when we're practicing meditation, there's a place where we're really attempting to do, a lot of people will talk about quieting the mind, making the mind go blank, is a place where we can just recognize that those things are coming in, that those particular voices are coming in and taking control of what we perceive as reality and the decisions that we should make based on what they're telling us. So what exactly is mindfulness and meditation, and how do we do it? It's paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And there's one particular tool that's fundamental to helping us pay attention in the present moment. And that is the breath. It's such a cool thing taken for granted. It can only happen in the moment. There's no such thing as breathing in the past or breathing in the future. It's the first thing that we do when we enter the world, and it's the last thing that we do when we leave. So when we can sit and quiet ourselves and just focus on the breath, which is the gateway to the deep now, then our brains will come in and try to derail us. But the trick is noticing it. And that's what we're really doing in meditation, is noticing it. And we're strengthening the neural connections of our awareness. So meditation is the bicep curl or the exercise that leads us to the understanding and the awareness of what's real and what's not real, what's stories and what are simple fear. And it has a profound impact on our decision making, whether or not we recoil from experience or whether or not we go forward and even get the opportunity to get into flow state. So as creatives, this is kind of a cycle of flow state. The place where we're really going to potentially get snagged is in the one to the right that I can't quite see. What is struggle? Thank you. It was even better that you know it. It's because when we initially start something, it's not particularly easy, and we don't necessarily know where it might lead. And we may encounter some doubts about how that will go, and that's when Baltimore and Woody Allen step in. But if we have been practicing meditation or just become aware and strengthen that muscle of awareness and noticing it, we can just recognize it for what it is and go forward with a more realistic situation and not need a Call Me Maybe song, right? So now I am trying to spend more time doing this. And it's been hard. It's been really hard. And what I've noticed is that without pounding drums and a room full of my beautiful sweaty friends, that Baltimore and Woody Allen get more playtime. And there's more doubts about how exactly this is going to turn out, this painting. What if it sucks and I'm wasting my time? I could be doing something else. I don't want anyone to see it, or I don't know what I'm doing. Who do I think I am? Why should I be able to paint? So this, there's one particular video that John Cleese has put together about creativity and about being in this particular state. And I think it's wonderful. And it talks particularly about these 5 aspects that are going to help us get into the creative state. And I'm going to send it to Mindy, a link, and she can put it in the Creative Mornings page. And I've probably listened to it 15 or 20 times since the first time I listened to it. It's just so lovely. And it's those 2 particular areas of time where if we're strengthening our awareness of the fear and the stories coming in, we can set that aside and continue. And I'll just leave that quote. Again, I really think that listening to Mikhail and flow state, because ultimately what he's talking about, unlike Red Bull, which is performance, athlete, and accomplishment, or corporations and getting more work out of people and making dollars, he's ultimately talking about what's the quality of our lives at the end of the day, and what is it that we could bring into our lives that really make them happy in a work of art. And I will end, oftentimes when I talk about my son, people ask how he's doing. He's doing so awesome! He's really into climbing, and he eats a lot. Thank you, guys.